In 1850, Daniel Thornridge, heir to a prestigious southern plantation, stands at his bedroom window watching preparations for his arranged marriage to Juliet Alden. But his heart belongs to Mira, a slave who works in the library, a woman his father sold away 3 months ago to prevent their forbidden attachment. As Daniel clutches a small bookmark Mira once made him, he makes a life-altering decision that will challenge everything he's been raised to believe about duty, status, and love. But before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. The sun rose over Thornridge Estate, revealing acres of cotton fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was 1850, and preparations for the biggest wedding of the decade were well underway. Servants scurried about the main house, polishing silver and arranging fresh-cut flowers from the garden. Daniel Thornridge stood at his bedroom window, watching the activity below with a heavy heart. At 27, he was tall and handsome, with dark hair and the strong jawline that marked all Thornridge men. As the only son of William Thornridge, he was set to inherit everything: the mansion, the land, the family name. And tomorrow, he would marry Juliet Alden, daughter of Senator Robert Alden. "Master Daniel," a voice called from the doorway, "your father requests your presence in the study." Daniel nodded without turning around. "Tell him I'll be down shortly." When the servant left, Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of cloth. It was a simple bookmark, made of blue thread stitched carefully onto plain fabric. His thumb traced over the tiny flower pattern as memories flooded his mind. "Mira," he whispered to the empty room. No one spoke her name in this house anymore, not since she'd been sent away 3 months ago. Mira had worked in the library, tending to the books and keeping the fire going during cold winter evenings. Unlike the other slaves, she could read, taught secretly by Daniel's mother before she passed away. Mira was quiet and kept to herself, but whenever Daniel entered the library, her eyes would light up. They began with simple conversations about books. Daniel would bring her new volumes from his trips to Charleston. She would listen to his dreams about changing things at Thornridge, making life better for everyone who worked there. Then, one evening, his father had caught them. Daniel was helping Mira carry firewood. It wasn't what they were doing that caused the problem. It was the way Daniel looked at her, like she was his whole world. The next morning, Mira was gone. Sold. No explanation, no goodbye. Daniel tucked the bookmark back into his pocket and headed downstairs to face his father. William Thornridge sat behind his massive oak desk, going through papers. At 60, he still commanded respect with his stern face and iron will. "You wanted to see me, Father?" Daniel said. William looked up. "Yes. The Aldens will be arriving this afternoon. I expect you to greet them properly." "Of course. And for God's sake, try to smile. You're marrying the daughter of a United States Senator tomorrow. Most men would be celebrating." Daniel nodded. "Is that all?" William's eyes narrowed. "No. Jenkins told me you've been asking questions about that girl again." "Her name is Mira," Daniel said, his voice tight. "Her name doesn't matter," William snapped. "What matters is your future and the future of this family. The Aldens will bring us connections to Washington. Their money combined with our land will make us unstoppable. And my happiness doesn't matter at all." William stood up, his face reddening. "Happiness? You think marriage is about happiness? It's about duty, boy. About securing your place in this world." He walked around the desk. "Whatever nonsense was in your head about that girl, you need to forget it. She's gone. And after tomorrow, you'll be a married man with responsibilities." Daniel wanted to argue, but what was the point? His father would never understand. "Now go change for lunch," William said, "and remember who you are." As Daniel left the study, he passed Martha, the head housekeeper who had helped raise him after his mother died. "Oh, Master Daniel," she said, her eyes full of concern. "You look troubled." Daniel forced a smile. "I'm fine, Martha." She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "I heard some news that might interest you," she whispered. "About Mira." Daniel's heart jumped. What did you hear?" "She was sold to the Campbell plantation. It's 2 counties east of here." Campbell? Daniel repeated. How do you know this? My cousin works in their kitchen. She wrote to me last week. Martha squeezed his arm. I thought you should know, but please don't do anything foolish. Daniel nodded, but his mind was already racing. The Campbell plantation. Finally, he knew where she was. Throughout the afternoon, Daniel went through the motions. He greeted the Aldens with perfect manners. He escorted Juliet around the guard, Enns listening to her excited chatter about the wedding. Juliet was beautiful, with golden hair and blue eyes. She wore an expensive blue dress that matched those eyes perfectly. Any man would be lucky to have her. Mother says our wedding will be in all the newspapers, Juliet said, twirling her parasol. Isn't that thrilling, Daniel? Very thrilling, he replied automatically. She stopped walking and turned to him. You don't sound thrilled. What's wrong? Are you nervous about tomorrow? Daniel looked at her. Juliet wasn't unkind. She simply lived in a world where everything had always gone her way. Just thinking about all the changes, he said. She smiled and took his arm again. Don't worry. We'll have a wonderful life together. Father says we'll split our time between here and Washington. You'll love the parties there. Everyone who matters attends. As the day wore on, Daniel felt increasingly trapped. Dinner that night was an elaborate affair with 30 guests, important families from across the county, all gathered to celebrate the union of the Thornridges and Aldens. Senator Alden stood to make a toast. To Daniel and my beautiful Juliet, may their marriage bring prosperity to both our families for generations to come. Everyone raised their glasses. Daniel did too, but the champagne tasted bitter in his mouth. Later that night, after all the guests had retired to their rooms, Daniel stood alone in his bedroom. Outside, the garden was lit with lanterns for the rehearsal dinner. He could hear Juliet's laughter floating up from below. He opened his wardrobe and pulled out his riding clothes. A knock at the door startled him. Come in, he called, quickly hiding the clothes behind his back. Martha entered with fresh towels. She took one look at his face and knew. You're going after her, aren't you? She asked. Daniel didn't answer. Martha sighed. Your father will never forgive you. I know. She set down the towels. The wedding is at noon tomorrow. If you're not back by then, I know what I'm doing, Martha. She studied him for a long moment. Your mother would have understood, she finally said. She always said love was the only thing worth fighting for. After Martha left, Daniel changed quickly. He packed a small bag with some clothes and all the money he had. He took the bookmark from his pocket and held it to his heart. I'm coming, Mira, he whispered. He waited until the house grew quiet. Then, with the skill of someone who had snuck out many times as a boy, Daniel slipped down the back stairs and out to the stables. His horse, Thunder, nickered softly as Daniel approached. Quiet boy, he murmured, quickly saddling him. We've got a long ride ahead. As he led Thunder away from the stables, Daniel looked back at Thornridge Estate one last time. The grand white house with its columns and wide porches had been his home for 27 years. Tomorrow, it would be in an uproar when they discovered he was gone. But he couldn't bring himself to care. Under the cover of darkness, Daniel rode away from everything he had ever known. His family, his inheritance, his future. All for the chance to find Mira. The night was cool, and the roads were empty. Daniel pushed Thunder hard, wanting to put as much distance as possible between himself and Thornridge before dawn. He had a map in his head from Martha's directions. Campbell Plantation was about 50 miles east, a full day's ride. As the first light of dawn broke across the sky, Daniel stopped at a small creek to let Thunder drink. His mind was full of questions. What would he say when he found Mira? Would she even want to see him again, and what then? Where could they go? He had no answers, only the desperate need to see her face again. By midday, when the wedding ceremony would be starting back at Thornridge, Daniel reached a small town. He stopped at the general store for supplies and to ask directions. The shopkeeper eyed him suspiciously. Daniel realized how he must look. A well-dressed young man, obviously from money, traveling alone and in a hurry. Campbell Plantation, the man repeated. That's another 20 miles east. Road gets rough after the creek crossing. Daniel thanked him and paid for his supplies. As he was leaving, the shopkeeper called out, Mister, if you don't mind me asking, you running from something? Daniel paused at the door. No. he said quietly. I'm running to something. Back on the road, Daniel felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. By this time, they would know he was gone. His father would be furious. Senator Alden would be insulted. Juliet would be heartbroken or, more likely, humiliated. None of that mattered now. The sun was beginning to set when Daniel finally saw it. The Campbell plantation house in the distance. It was smaller than Thornridge, but still impressive with its wide front porch and tall windows. His heart pounded as he approached. How would he find Mira among all the slaves? What if they wouldn't let him see her? He slowed Thunder to a walk as they neared the property. That's when he saw her. In the distance, a slender figure in a simple dress knelt by the well drawing water. Even from afar, he would know her anywhere. Her graceful movements, the way she held herself. Mira, he whispered, his voice catching in his throat. Then louder, Mira! She froze, the bucket halfway up from the well. For a moment she didn't move, as if she thought she was hearing things. Then, slowly, she turned D. Daniel saw her face, those dark eyes that had haunted his dreams for 3 months. He saw the shock, the disbelief, then recognition. He jumped down from Thunder and ran toward her. Mira stood perfectly still, as if afraid he might vanish if she moved. When he reached her, Daniel stopped just short of touching her. He could see tears in her eyes, fear mixed with something else. Hope, perhaps. You can't be here, she whispered, looking around nervously. They'll ruin you. Daniel reached out slowly and took her hand. It was rough from work, but still so familiar. Let them, he said. I don't want the name. I don't want the money. I want you. Mira's eyes widened. But your wedding. There is no wedding, he said firmly. Not unless it's ours. She started to cry then, silent tears streaming down her face. Daniel dropped to one knee in the dirt, still holding her hand. Mira, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. Come home with me. Not as a servant, not in secret. As my wife. Mira's free hand covered her mouth. How? She whispered through her fingers. Where would we go? They'll never let us be together. I don't know, Daniel admitted, but I know I can't live without you. We'll go north maybe, to Boston or New York, somewhere we can start new lives. You would leave everything behind for me. I already have, he said simply. For a long moment, Mira just looked at him, tears still falling. Then she squeezed his hand. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll go with you. Daniel felt as if his heart might burst. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. But their moment of joy was short-lived. What the hell is going on here? A harsh voice demanded. Daniel turned to see a man on horseback watching them. From his fine clothes and commanding presence, it had to be Mr. C, Ample himself. Step away from her, boy, Campbell said, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. That girl is my property. Daniel felt Mira trembling against him, but he didn't let go. Not anymore, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I've come to buy her freedom. Campbell's eyebrows shot up. Buy her? And who might you be? Daniel Thornridge. Recognition flashed in Campbell's eyes. Everyone in 3 counties knew the Thornridge name. Thornridge? Aren't you supposed to be getting married today? Campbell asked, confusion replacing his anger. Plans changed, Daniel said simply. Campbell studied them both for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, harsh sound. Well, well, a Thornridge and a slave girl. Now I've seen everything. He shook his head. Your daddy know about this? No, and I don't care if he does. Campbell dismounted, still watching them with a calculating look. Come up to the house. We'll discuss this unusual situation. As they walked toward the house, Daniel kept his arm around Mira's shoulders. He could feel her fear, but also her determination. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Behind them, the sun sank below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. And somewhere back at Thornridge Estate, a wedding party was in chaos, searching for a groom who had chosen love over duty, freedom over fortune. Daniel didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in months he felt truly alive. With Mira beside him, He was ready to face whatever came next. The Campbell plantation house was smaller than Thornridge, but still impressive with its polished wooden floors and expensive furniture. Daniel kept Mira close as they followed Mr. Campbell into his study. "Sit," Campbell ordered, gesturing to 2 chairs across from his desk. Daniel sat, but Mira hesitated, unused to being treated as an equal in a white man's home. "It's okay," Daniel whispered, taking her hand. She perched nervously on the edge of the chair. Campbell poured himself a whiskey and leaned against his desk, studying them. "So, Thornridge, you want to buy this girl?" "Her name is Mira," Daniel said firmly. Campbell raised an eyebrow. "Mira, then? You rode all the way from Thornridge on your wedding day to buy her freedom?" He shook his head in disbelief. "I've heard some wild stories in my time, but this one takes the cake." "This isn't a story," Daniel said. "I love her." Mira squeezed his hand, still trembling slightly. Campbell downed his whiskey. "Love? Between a plantation heir and a slave girl?" He laughed. "Boy, do you have any idea what you're doing? Your father will disown you. Society will shun you. Where do you think you'll go?" "North," Daniel answered. "Boston, maybe, or New York." "And what will you do there? Have you ever worked a day in your life?" Daniel hesitated. It was true. He'd never had to work. He'd been raised to manage Thornridge, to give orders rather than take them. "I'll find something," he said with more confidence than he felt. "I'm educated. I can read and write. I know numbers." Campbell refilled his glass. "And what about her? You think a colored girl from the South will be welcome up north? Even free Negroes face hardship there." Mira spoke for the first time, her voice soft but steady. "We'll face it together." Campbell looked at her with new interest. "You speak well for a—" "My mother taught her to read," Daniel interrupted. "She's intelligent and capable." Campbell seemed to be calculating something in his head. "I paid a good price for her. $300. "I'll give you 500, Daniel said immediately. 1,000. "I don't have that much with me." Campbell smiled, seeing his advantage. "How much do you have?" $400, Daniel admitted, "but I have more at home. I could—" "You won't be welcome at home again, boy. Not after this." Campbell's voice softened slightly. "Look, I'm not a monster, so I can see you two care for each other, but business is business." Daniel felt desperation rising. "What about my horse? Thunder's a purebred, worth at least 300. Campbell walked to the window and looked out at Daniel's horse. "Fine animal," he admitted, "so that's 700. He turned back to them, still short. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his gold pocket watch. It had belonged to his grandfather, inscribed with the Thornridge family crest. "This is worth at least 500. It's gold with diamonds around the face." Campbell took the watch, examining it carefully. "Your father give you this?" "My grandfather, before he died." Campbell seemed to consider for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, the money, the horse, and the watch for the girl's freedom papers." He set the watch down on his desk. "But I want one more thing." Daniel tensed. "What?" "Information." Campbell leaned forward. "Your father and I have been rivals for years. He's blocked my attempts to expand my trading business. Tell me something I can use against him. Some weakness, some secret, and she's free." Daniel stared at him in shock. "You want me to betray my father?" "You already have, boy. Running out on the wedding he arranged? That's betrayal enough." Mira touched Daniel's arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Not for me." Daniel looked from her to Campbell. The older man was watching him with calculating eyes, enjoying his power. "No," Daniel finally said. "I won't do that. My father and I have our differences, but I won't sell his secrets." Instead of anger, respect flickered across Campbell's face. "Integrity." Didn't expect that. He drummed his fingers on the desk. "Tell you what, I recently bought some land near the river. It needs clearing. Work for me for 3 months, alongside the other field hands, and she's free." 3 months, Daniel repeated. "But we need to leave now. My father will be looking for me." "That's my offer. Take it or leave it." Daniel looked at Mira. Her eyes were filled with fear, but also trust, complete trust in him. "I'll do it," he said. Campbell smiled. "Good. You start tomorrow at dawn. And don't think I'll go easy on you because you're a Thornridge. You'll work just like everyone else." "Where will Mira stay?" Daniel asked. "She'll continue her duties in the house, but she'll have her own room. No one will bother her." Campbell stood. "Now it's late. I'll have someone show you to the slave quarters, Thornridge. His name is Daniel," Mira said quietly. Campbell laughed. "Daniel, then. Better get some rest. Tomorrow will be the hardest day of your life." As they left the study, Daniel knew Campbell was right. He'd never done physical labor before, but he'd do whatever it took to earn Mira's freedom. The slave quarters were a shock after the luxury Daniel had known all his life. The small cabin he was assigned to had dirt floors and barely enough room for the 6 thin pallets where men slept. The other slaves watched him with suspicion as he found an empty spot in the corner. That night, lying on the hard ground, listening to the snores and coughs of the men around him, Daniel Q questioned his decision for the first time. Not his choice to find Mira, he would never regret that, but his naive belief that they could simply run away together. Morning came too soon. A bell rang before sunrise, and the cabin stirred to life. An older man named Joseph showed Daniel what to do: where to wash, where to get breakfast, a bowl of thin porridge, where to line up for the day's assignments. The overseer, a hard-faced man named Tucker, sneered when he saw Daniel. Well, Mr. Thornridge himself. Boss says you're to clear land today." He handed Daniel an axe that felt impossibly heavy. "Let's see those soft hands chop trees." The work was brutal. The July sun beat down mercilessly as Daniel swung the axe again and again. Blisters formed on his hands, then broke, leaving them raw and bleeding. His muscles screamed in protest. By midday, he could barely lift his arms. "Drink," Joseph said, offering Daniel his water jug during their brief break. "Slowly now." Daniel took a careful sip. "Thank you." Joseph studied him. "Why are you doing this, rich boy? No one ever seen nothing like it." "For Mira," Daniel said simply. Joseph's weathered face softened slightly. "The girl from the big house, she's special to you?" "I love her." Joseph shook his head. "Love. That's a luxury for folks like you." "Not anymore," Daniel said, looking down at his bleeding hands. Joseph was quiet for a moment. Then he took a rag from his pocket and tore it in half. "Here, wrap your hands. It'll help some." "Thank you," Daniel said again, touched by the small kindness. "Don't thank me yet. You still got half a day ahead of you." By sunset, Daniel could barely walk back to the quarters. Every muscle in his body ached. His hands were raw meat. But he forced himself to stay awake, waiting. After the evening meal, Mira appeared at the door of the cabin. The other men discreetly moved outside, giving them privacy. "Oh, Daniel," she gasped when she saw his hands. She had brought a small pot of salve and clean rags. "Let me." As she gently cleaned and wrapped his wounds, Daniel watched her face. Despite everything, she was even more beautiful than he remembered. Her dark eyes were full of concern, her touch gentle. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For not coming sooner, for letting my father send you away." Mira shook her head. "You're here now, that's all that matters." 3 months, he promised. 3 months, and we'll be free." She finished bandaging his hands and leaned forward to kiss him softly on the lips. It was their first kiss, sweet and full of promise. "I should go," she whispered. "I'll try to come tomorrow night." After she left, Daniel lay back on his pallet, his body in agony but his heart lighter than it had been in months. The next day was even harder. His muscles had stiffened overnight, and every movement was torture. Tucker seemed to take special pleasure in assigning him the most difficult tasks, but Daniel refused to complain. He worked alongside men who had endured this their entire lives. His suffering was temporary. Theirs had been endless. Slowly, the other slaves began to accept him. Not as an equal, he was still white, still privileged, despite his current circumstances, but as someone worthy of basic respect. Joseph became a mentor of sorts, showing Daniel how to hold the axe to prevent further damage to his hands, how to pace himself through the long days. Each night, Mira would visit briefly, bringing salve for his wounds and news from the main house. "Your father has men looking for you," she told him a week into their arrangement. "Mr. Campbell had visitors today, men asking questions." Daniel wasn't surprised. "Did Campbell tell them I'm here?" "No, he sent them away." Mira hesitated. "Daniel, I'm afraid. What if your father finds you? What will he do?" "He can't force me to go back," Daniel said. "I'm a grown man." "But he's powerful and angry." Daniel took her hand. "Let him be angry. In 3 months, we'll be gone." But Mira's warning proved prophetic. 2 weeks later, as Daniel was chopping trees at the edge of the property, he heard horses approaching. Looking up, he saw 3 riders and recognized his father's foreman, Jenkins, among them. Daniel dropped his axe and ran, not toward the main house where he might be seen, but deeper into the forest. He heard shouts behind him, then the sound of horses crashing through underbrush. His exhausted body betrayed him. After only a few minutes of running, a stitch in his side forced him to slow. The riders caught up quickly. "Master Daniel," Jenkins called, relief in his voice. "Thank God we found you." Daniel turned to face them, breathing hard. "Go away, Jenkins. Tell my father you didn't find me." Jenkins dismounted, approaching cautiously. "Sir, please. Your father is beside himself, and the scandal, everyone's talking. I don't care. Miss Juliet is heartbroken." Daniel felt a pang of guilt. Juliet didn't deserve to be humiliated. "Tell her I'm sorry, but I couldn't go through with it." Jenkins glanced at the other men, then lowered his voice. "Is it true what they're saying, that you ran off because of a slave girl?" "Her name is Mira," Daniel said, tired of having to repeat it. "And yes." Jenkins looked genuinely confused. "But sir, your father would have given you any girl you wanted. You didn't have to run away." Daniel realized Jenkins didn't understand. In his world and in his father's, slaves were property. Objects of desire, perhaps, but not people to love, to marry. "You wouldn't understand," Daniel said. "Just go. Tell my father I'm not coming back." "I can't do that, sir," Jenkins signaled to the other men who dismounted. "Your father ordered us to bring you home, by force if necessary." Daniel backed away. "I'm not going anywhere." What happened next was a blur. The men rushed him. Daniel fought back, landing a solid punch on one man's jaw, but he was outnumbered and weakened from weeks of hard labor. They soon had him pinned to the ground. "Sorry about this, Master Daniel," Jenkins said, genuine regret in his voice as he tied Daniel's hands. "Your father's orders." They hauled him onto a horse. Daniel struggled and shouted, but it was useless. As they rode away from the Campbell plantation, his heart twisted with fear, not for himself, but for Mira. What would happen to her now? The journey back to Thornridge took all day. They arrived after dark, the grand house lit up like a beacon in the night. Daniel was marched straight to his father's study. William Thornridge stood by the fireplace, a glass of brandy in his hand. He looked older than Daniel remembered, the lines in his face deeper. "Leave us," he ordered Jenkins and the others. When they were alone, William studied his son. Daniel knew how he must look, tanned from the sun, clothes filthy, hands still bandaged from his labor. "So," William finally said, "the prodigal son returns." "Not by choice," Daniel replied, holding up his bound wrists. William gestured impatiently. "Untie yourself, you're not a prisoner." "Aren't I?" But Daniel worked at the knots until his hands were free. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" William asked, his voice dangerously calm. "The humiliation you've caused this family. Senator Alden has severed all ties with us. The Weddingu STS spread the story across 3 states. "I'm sorry about Juliet," Daniel said. "She didn't deserve that." "Juliet?" William scoffed. "She's already engaged to the Morrison boy." "No, it's not her I'm worried about. It's the Thornridge name. Generations of respect, and you destroyed it in a day." "For what? A slave girl?" "Her name is Mira," Daniel said automatically. William slammed his glass down. "I don't care what her name is. She is property, our property, until I sold her." "She's a person," Daniel insisted, "and I love her." William stared at his son as if seeing a stranger. "Love? You don't even know what the word means." "I know it means I can't live without her." William shook his head in disgust. You sound like your mother. She filled your head with romantic nonsense. At the mention of his mother, Daniel felt a surge of anger. Don't bring her into this. William walked to his desk and pulled out a document. I made a deal with Campbell, bought the girl back. Daniel's heart leapt. Mira, she's here. In the cellar. William's face was cold. I paid a premium price, more than she's worth. I want to see her. No. William picked up another document. This is your inheritance, Daniel. Everything that would have been yours someday. The house, the land, the business interests, everything. He held the paper over the candle on his desk. The EDGE began to burn. Is that supposed to frighten me? Daniel asked. I don't care about the inheritance. William watched the paper burn. I know. That's what worries me most. He dropped the half-burned document onto a silver tray. But you should care about her life. Daniel went still. What do you mean? I mean, son, that her fate depends on your choices now. William sat in his leather chair. Here's what's going to happen. You will stay at Thornridge. You will apologize to the Aldens, though that bridge is likely burned. You will start taking your responsibilities seriously, and in time I'll find another suitable match for you. And if I refuse, William's eyes were cold, then I'll sell her again, far away this time, to the sugar plantations in Louisiana. I'm told slaves don't last long there. Daniel felt sick. You wouldn't. Try me. For a long moment, father and son stared at each other across the desk. Daniel saw nothing in his father's eyes but cold determination. I want to see her, Daniel repeated. Now. William considered, then nodded. Jenkins, he called. The foreman appeared immediately, as if he'd been waiting just outside. Take my son to see the girl in the cellar. 10 minutes. The cellar was dark and damp, used for storing root vegetables and wine. Daniel followed Jenkins down the narrow stairs, his heart pounding. At the far end, a small figure huddled on a pile of burlap sacks. In the dim light of Jenkins' lantern, Daniel could see it was Mira. Mira! He rushed to her side. She looked up, her face lighting with disbelief. Daniel! He gathered her in his arms, holding her tight. She was trembling, her dress damp from the cellar floor. Are you hurt? He asked, searching her face. No, just scared. She touched his face. They said your father's men took you. They did, Mira, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. She shook her head. No, don't ever say that. Jenkins cleared his throat. I'll be waiting at the top of the stairs. 5 minutes. When he was gone, Daniel quickly explained his father's threat. He'll send you to Louisiana if I don't stay and do as he says. Mira's eyes widened with fear. Everyone knew about the sugar plantations, places where slaves worked until they died from exhaustion. Then you have to stay, she said immediately. No, we'll run. Tonight. I know where he keeps money in the study. We'll take horses. Daniel. She placed her hand on his cheek. We'll never make it. Your father won't stop looking. Not now. I can't leave you, he said, his voice breaking. And I can't let you sacrifice your future for me. Tears filled her eyes. Maybe it's better this way. You here, me somewhere else. At least we'll both be alive. That's not living, Dan Isle said fiercely. Not for me. Time's up, Jenkins called from the stairs. Daniel held Mira tighter. I'll find a way, he promised. Whatever happens, I'll find a way for us to be together. She kissed him then desperately, as if memorizing the feel of his lips against hers. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Always. Then Jenkins was there, pulling Daniel away. The last thing he saw was Mira's face, tears streaming down her cheeks as the cellar door closed between them. Back in his father's study, Daniel faced William with cold fury. Well? William asked. I'll stay, Daniel said, the words like ash in his mouth. On one condition. Mira stays too, not in the cellar, in her old position in the library, and you never threaten her again. William nodded, satisfied. Agreed, as long as you keep your distance from her. And when I marry whoever you choose, she gets her freedom. William Conside read this. Fine. When you marry, she goes free, with enough money to start a new life far from here. It was the best deal Daniel could hope for, a way to ensure Mira's safety now and her freedom later. "I want your word," Daniel insisted. "Daniel, are your solemn vow as a Thornridge?" William stood and extended his hand. "You have it. Now give me your word that you'll be the son and heir I expect." Daniel hesitated only a moment before shaking his father's hand. "I promise." That night, alone in his bedroom, the same room he'd fled from weeks earlier, Daniel stared out at the moonlit garden. Somewhere on the estate, Mira was also alone, probably crying, but she was safe, for now, and somehow, someday, he would find a way to keep his promise to her. They would be together, free. He just needed time and patience. Little did he know that fate had other plans, plans that would test his love for Mira in ways he never imagined. 6 months passed at Thornridge Estate. Fall turned to winter, and the cotton fields lay dormant under a thin layer of frost each morning. Inside the main house, life settled into an uneasy routine. Daniel did everything his father asked. He attended business meetings in Charleston. He reviewed the plantation accounts. He even agreed to attend social functions where eligible young women were present, though he remained polite but distant with all of the. Sias William Thornridge watched his son's obedience with satisfaction but also suspicion. Daniel was too compliant, too willing to follow orders. The fire that had driven him to abandon his wedding and work as a field hand seemed extinguished. What William didn't know was that Daniel had a plan. Every night he wrote in a journal, making calculations: how much money they would need, where they could go, how they could travel without being caught. He was biding his time, waiting for the right moment. As for Mira, she had returned to her duties in the library. She kept her head down, her eyes lowered whenever the master of the house passed by. But when she was alone with the books she loved, a small smile would sometimes cross her face. Because she knew what no one else did, that Daniel left notes for her, hidden in the pages of certain volumes. "Stay strong. I haven't forgotten my promise. One day we'll be free together." Simple messages, but they kept hope alive in her heart. They were careful never to speak directly to each other. Daniel would sometimes linger in the library, reading while Mira dusted shelves or arranged books, but they exchanged only the briefest glances. It was too dangerous to do more. Martha, the head housekeeper, was their secret ally. She would carry verbal messages between them when it was safe. "Miss Mira, the first edition of Shakespeare needs dusting at precisely 4 o'clock, she might say, letting Mira know when Daniel would be in the library. Or to Daniel, "Your father will be meeting with the cotton buyers all afternoon, sir." These small kindnesses gave them moments, brief, precious moments, in the same room. It wasn't enough, but it was something. One cold January morning, William called Daniel to his study. A rare snowfall dusted the grounds outside, and a fire roared in the hearth. "I've been thinking," William said, looking unusually pleased with himself. "It's time we found you a new match." Daniel tensed, but kept his face neutral. "So soon?" "It's been 6 months since the unfortunate incident with the Oldens. People's memories are short when there's advantage to be gained." William smiled. "I've been corresponding with Henry Blackwell. You remember him?" Daniel nodded. Blackwell was a wealthy banker from Charleston, known for his political connections and his beautiful daughter, Charlotte. "His daughter is 20, well-educated, and by all accounts quite lovely," William continued. "The Blackwells are coming to dinner next week. I expect you to make a good impression." Daniel swallowed his immediate refusal. "Yes, father." William looked surprised at his easy agreement. "Good, very good." He hesitated, then added, "I know our arrangement has been difficult for you, but in time, you'll see I was right. Some suitable young woman will make you forget all about that girl. Her name is Mira," Daniel said quietly. William's expression hardened. "I've kept my end of our bargain. She's here unharmed, but don't test my patience, boy." Daniel nodded stiffly and left the study. His mind was racing. A new marriage arrangement would speed up his timetable. Once his father found him a bride, Mira would go free. That was their deal. But Daniel needed to be ready to leave with her when that happened. He needed to talk to her, really talk to her, not just exchange glances across the library. But how? The opportunity came sooner than he expected. That afternoon, a messenger arrived with news that pulled William away from Thornridge. A fire had damaged one of his warehouses in Charleston. He would be gone for at least 2 days. As soon as his father's carriage disappeared down the drive, Daniel went to find Martha. "I need to speak with Mira," he said urgently. "Tonight. Can you arrange it?" Martha looked worried. "Master Daniel, it's too dangerous. Your father has eyes everywhere. He's in Charleston. Please, Martha, it's important." The old housekeeper sighed. "The East Garden shed. After everyone's asleep, I'll tell her." That night, Daniel slipped out of the house just after midnight. The air was bitter cold, his breath forming clouds in front of him as he made his way through the snow-covered garden to the small shed where gardening tools were stored. Mira was already there, wrapped in a thin shawl, shivering in the darkness. "Daniel," she whispered as he entered. He pulled her into his arms, feeling her cold cheeks against his neck. For a long moment, they just held each other, savoring the closeness that had been denied them for months. "You're freezing," he said, taking off his coat and wrapping it around her shoulders. "I'm fine now," she smiled up at him. "What's happened?" "Martha said it was urgent." Daniel took her hands in his. "My father is arranging another marriage for me. The Blackwells are coming next week." Fear flashed in Mira's eyes. "So soon?" "Listen to me," Daniel said intently. "This could be our chance. Remember our deal. When I marry, you get your freedom. But I have no intention of marrying Charlotte Blackwell or anyone else." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to be ready. The moment my father grants your freedom, we leave. Together." He squeezed her hands. "I've been saving money. Not much, but enough to get us north. I have a plan." Mira looked doubtful. "Your father will never let you go. Not after what happened last time." "He won't have a choice. Once you're legally free, he has no hold over me." Daniel pulled her closer. "We could be in Boston by spring. Start a new life." "What kind of life would we have?" Mira asked softly. "A white man and a former slave? Where would we be accepted?" "There are places. Communities where people like us can live in peace." Daniel wasn't entirely sure this was true, but he needed to believe it. "We'll find a way." Mira leaned her head against his chest. "I'm afraid, Daniel. Not for myself, but for you. You'd be giving up everything." "Not everything," he said, tilting her face up to his. "Not what matters most." They kissed then, a desperate, hungry kiss that held all the longing of their months apart. When they finally broke apart, Mira touched his face gently. "Promise me you won't do anything rash. Your father is a dangerous man when crossed." "I promise to be careful," Daniel said, "but I won't give up on us. Never." They stayed in the shed for another hour, making plan S in hushed voices, sharing brief touches and kisses. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it rekindled the hope that had begun to flicker in both their hearts. When they finally parted, Daniel watched Mira slip back toward the servants' quarters, his coat still around her shoulders. He felt lighter than he had in months. Soon they would be free. But Daniel had underestimated his father's suspicion. William returned from Charleston the next day earlier than expected, and he had not gone alone. Daniel was in the study reviewing ledgers when his father walked in, accompanied by a tall, hard-faced man Daniel had never seen before. "Daniel, this is Mr. Reeves," William said. "He's going to be staying with us for a while." Daniel stood, automatically extending his hand. "Welcome to Thornridge, Mr. Reeves." Reeves shook his hand with a grip that was painfully tight. "Pleasure, Mr. Thornridge." There was something in the man's cold eyes that made Daniel uneasy. "What brings you to our home?" he asked. William answered before Reeves could speak. "Mr. Reeves is a business associate. He'll be helping me with some security matters." The way his father emphasized security sent a chill down Daniel's spine. He knew instantly what this meant. His father had hired Reeves to watch him, and possibly Mira too. His suspicions were confirmed over the following day. Wherever Daniel went on the estate, Reeves seemed to appear. When he visited the stables, Reeves was examining a horse in the next stall. When he walked the grounds, Reeves could be seen watching from a distance. Most disturbing of all, Reeves took to spending time in the library. He didn't read. Daniel doubted the man could read at all. He just sat there, cleaning his fingernails with a knife, while Mira worked in terrified silence. Daniel's frustration grew with each passing day. His father had effectively cut off any chance of private communication with Mira, and the dinner with the Blackwells was approaching quickly. 2 days before the Blackwells were due to arrive, Daniel decided he had to act. With Reeves watching his every move, he couldn't speak to Mira directly. But there was one person who might be able to help. He found Joseph, the older slave who had helped him during his time at the Campbell plantation, working in the tobacco barn. To Daniel's relief, Reeves was nowhere in sight. "Joseph," Daniel said quietly, "I need your help." The older man looked up from his work, his weathered face revealing nothing. "Master Daniel." "Please, just Daniel." He glanced around to make sure they were alone. "I know my father bought you from Campbell along with Mira. I need to ask you something." Joseph set down his tools. "What can I do for you?" "You helped me once when I was at my lowest. I haven't forgotten that kindness." Daniel lowered his voice further. "I need to get a message to Mira, without that man Reeves knowing." Joseph studied him for a long moment. "This about you two running away?" Daniel blinked in surprise. "How did you—" "Folks talk," Joseph said simply, "and I got eyes. I see how you look at her, how she looks at you. Then you understand. I love her, Joseph. I want to give her a better life." Joseph sighed heavily. "A better life? You even know what that means for someone like her? Like me?" "Freedom," Daniel said. "The chance to live as a person, not property. Freedom ain't just a word, Master Daniel. It's harder than you think." Joseph looked tired suddenly. "But I seen how you worked at Campbell's. You ain't afraid of hard." "Will you help us?" Daniel asked. After a long pause, Joseph nodded. "What's the message?" Daniel told him the E-plan. They would leave the night after the Blackwells' visit, before any formal engagement could be announced. He had money hidden in his room, enough for train tickets north. Mira should be ready, but take no obvious actions that might alert Reeves. Joseph listened carefully, then said, "I'll tell her tonight." "Thank you," Daniel said fervently. "I won't forget this." Joseph's face remained impassive. "Just be sure you know what you're doing. Both of you going to pay a price for this choice." "Some prices are worth paying," Daniel replied. The night of the Blackwells' visit arrived. The house was polished to perfection, every silver piece gleaming, fresh flowers arranged in the dining room. Daniel dressed in his finest clothes, the image of the perfect Southern gentleman. Charlotte Blackwell was indeed lovely, with auburn hair and a gentle smile. Under different circumstances, Daniel might have found her charming. She was clearly intelligent, conversing easily about literature and politics. But all he could think about was Mira, and the fact that in less than 24 hours, they would be leaving Thornridge forever. "You seem distracted, Mr. Thornridge," Charlotte said as they walked in the garden after dinner. "Have I said something to offend you?" Daniel forced himself to focus. "Not at all, Miss Blackwell. I apologize. I've had some business matters on my mind." She smiled. "Father says you're quite the businessman. He's very impressed with how you've helped expand Thornridge's operations." Daniel nodded, feeling like an imposter. Yes, he'd done what his father asked these past months, but his heart had never been in it. Soon none of this would matter. The evening progressed smoothly. William was clearly pleased with how well Daniel and Charlotte seemed to get along. By the time the Blackwells depart Ed, with promises to host the Thornridges in Charleston the following month, William was practically glowing with satisfaction. "She's perfect," he declared as they watched the Blackwells' carriage disappear down the drive. "Beautiful, well-connected, and from all appearances, quite taken with you." Daniel said nothing. "I'll speak to Blackwell about a formal arrangement next week," William continued. "We could announce the engagement by spring." "And Mira?" Daniel asked, unable to stop himself. "Our agreement—" William waved a dismissive hand. Yes. Once the engagement is official, she'll get her papers and enough money to start somewhere new." He looked sideways at his son. Far from here. Daniel nodded, trying to hide his relief. Everything was falling into place. That night, he couldn't sleep. He packed a small bag with only essentials, a change of clothes, the money he'd saved, a few keepsakes. The E train to Richmond left at dawn. From there, they would head north to Philadelphia, then Boston. Around 2 in the morning, Daniel heard a soft knock at his door. Thinking it might be Martha with a message from Mira, he opened it quickly. It was Reeves. "Evening, Mr. Thornridge," the man said with a cold smile. "Mind if I come in?" Before Daniel could answer, Reeves pushed past him into the room. His eyes immediately fell on the packed bag on the bed. "Going somewhere?" Daniel's mind raced. "I was preparing for a business trip to Charleston." "In the middle of the night? Without telling your father?" Reeves picked up the bag, examining its contents. "Doesn't look like business attire to me." "That's none of your concern," Daniel said, trying to maintain his composure. "Now, if you'll excuse me." "Oh, but it is my concern," Reeves interrupted. "Your father pays me good money to watch you. And that girl." Daniel felt a chill. "What girl?" Reeves laughed. "Don't play dumb with me, boy. The pretty little slave from the library. Mira, is it?" He set the bag down. "Your father knows all about your midnight meeting in the garden shed." Daniel's blood ran cold. "What? You think the old man doesn't have eyes and ears everywhere? He knew the moment you stepped foot outside that night." Reeves smiled, clearly enjoying Daniel's shock. "Why do you think he hired M.E.? "Where is my father now?" Daniel demanded. "Waiting for you in his study." Reeves gestured to the door. "After you." Daniel had no choice but to follow. His mind was spinning. If his father knew about their meeting, what else did he know? What about their plan to leave? And most importantly, where was Mira? William was indeed waiting in his study, a glass of brandy in his hand. He looked up as Daniel entered, his face a mask of disappointment. "Sit down," he ordered. Daniel remained standing. "Where's Mira?" William took a slow sip of his brandy. "Safe, for now." "What have you done with her?" "Nothing. Yet." William set his glass down. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't be watching you after what happened before?" Daniel clenched his fists. "We had an agreement. When I marry, she goes free." "And I intended to honor that agreement," William said. "But you clearly had no intention of honoring yours, planning to run away the moment she got her freedom papers. Did you think I was a fool?" "Where is she?" Daniel repeated, his voice rising. William nodded to Reeves, who left the room silently. "She'll be here momentarily, but first we need to be clear about something." He leaned forward. "This ends tonight. Your foolish infatuation with this girl has gone on long enough." "It's not infatuation," Daniel said firmly. "I love her." William slammed his hand on the desk. "Love? You don't even know what the word means. She's a slave, Daniel, property." "Not to me." "Then you're a bigger fool than I thought." William stood up. "Do you have any idea what would happen if you ran off with her? The scandal would destroy this family. You'd be outcasts. No respectable person would receive you. Is that the life you want? Living in poverty, shunned by society?" "If it's with her, yes." William stared at his son, genuine bewilderment in his eyes. "I don't understand you. I've given you everything, education, privilege, position, and you'd throw it all away for a girl who isn't even your kind." "She's more my kind than anyone I've ever met," Daniel said quietly. "She sees me, not the Thornridge name, not the inheritance, just me." The door opened and Reeves returned, pushing Mira ahead of him. Her hands were tied in front of her, and there was a bruise forming on her cheek. She looked terrified. "Mira!" Daniel moved toward her, but Reeves stepped between them. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaking, "I'm sorry." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Daniel said, his eyes never leaving her face. To his father, he said, "Untie her, now." William ignored him. "Miss Mira," he said, his voice falsely pleasant, "it seems my son has developed quite an attachment to you." Mira said nothing, her eyes downcast. "Look at me when I speak to you," William ordered. Slowly, she raised her eyes. "That's better." Now I find myself in a difficult position. My son refuses to accept his proper place in society. He's rejected one suitable match already. And now, despite Charlotte Blackwell's obvious charms, he plans to run away with you." William circled her slowly. "What am I to do about this?" "Let her go," Daniel said. "She's done nothing wrong. On the contrary, she's corrupted my son, turned him against his family, his heritage, his duty." William stopped in front of Mira. "But I'm a fair man. I'll give her a choice." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a document. "These are freedom papers. I'm prepared to sign them tonight. She can leave Thornridge immediately with enough money to start a new life." He paused. "In California." "California?" Daniel repeated. "That's thousands of miles away." "Precisely." William smiled coldly. "Or she can stay here as a slave for the rest of her life, working in the fields, not the library." "You can't do this," Daniel protested. "We had an agreement." "An agreement you were planning to break," William cut in. "These are the new terms. She goes free but far away from you. Or she stays in chains." He turned to Mira. "Your choice, girl." Mira looked from William to Daniel, tears filling her eyes. "If I go, will you promise not to punish Daniel? To let him live his life?" "Mira, no," Daniel started. William held up a hand to silence his son. "I give you my word. Daniel will be free to make his own choices, after you're gone." Mira took a deep breath. "Then I'll go." "No." Daniel moved toward her, but Reeves caught him, holding him back. "Mira, we can still leave together. Tonight." "And go where, Daniel?" she asked softly. "Your father would hunt us down. You know he would. I don't care, we'd keep running." "I care," she said. "I can't live looking over my shoulder every day, and I can't let you live that way either." A tear slid down her cheek. "This is better. I'll be free, and so will you." William watched this exchange with triumph in his eyes. A wise decision. He signed the freedom papers with a flourish. "Reeves will escort you to Charleston tomorrow. From there, a ship leaves for San Francisco in 3 days. Your passage is paid." Daniel struggled against Reeves's grip. "Father, please, don't do this." But William wasn't listening. He handed the freedom papers to Mira. "You're no longer property of Thornridge Estate. I suggest you pack your belongings and be ready to leave at first light." Mira clutched the papers to her chest, her eyes never leaving Daniel's face. "May I say goodbye?" she asked quietly. William hesitated, then nodded. 2 minutes, alone, but Reeves will be right outside the door." After William and Reeves left, Daniel rushed to Mira, untying her hands and pulling her into his arms. "Don't do this," he begged. "We can still run. Tonight." Mira held him tightly. "No, Daniel. Your father would never stop hunting us, you know that." "Then I'll come find you in California." She pulled back to look at him. "It would take months, and how would you even know where to look?" "I'd search every town, every city." Daniel's voice broke. "I can't lose you again, Mira. I can't." "You won't lose me," she said, touching his face. "Not really, not here." She placed her hand over his heart. "I'll always be with you, and you with me." "It's not enough," Daniel said, tears streaming down his face now. "I want a life with you, a real life." "Maybe someday," Mira whispered. "If it's meant to be, we'll find each other again." The door opened. "Time's up," Reeves announced. Desperately, Daniel kissed Mira one last time, pouring all his love, all his broken dreams into that final embrace. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Forever." "And I love you," she answered. "Whatever happens, I'll remember that." Then Reeves was pulling them apart, leading Mira away. Daniel watched helplessly as she was taken from him for the second time. But this time was different. This time, she was leaving as a free woman, not property, but a person with the right to choose her own path, even if that path led away from him. After they were gone, Daniel confronted his father. "Are you satisfied now you've torn us apart again?" William looked almost sad. "It's for the best, son. One day you'll understand." "Never," Daniel said. "I will never understand or forgive what you've done. You don't have to forgive me. Just live the life you were born to lead." William poured 2 glasses of brandy, offering one to Daniel. "To new beginnings." Daniel ignored the glass. "You think this is over? That I'll just forget her and marry Charlotte Blackwell?" "In time, yes." William sipped his drink. "The heart heals, Daniel, even from this." "Not mine," Daniel said. "And I will never, never marry anyone else." William shrugged. "We'll see. For now, get some rest. Tomorrow will be a new day." But for Daniel, it felt like the end of everything. As he walked back to his room, he passed the library, Mira's domain for so many years. It was dark now, the books silent witnesses to a love that had blossomed and been crushed between these walls. He entered, lighting a single lamp. In the dim glow, he ran his fingers over the volumes they had discussed, the shelves she had dusted, the chair where she had sat to read when no one was watching. On the desk lay a single blue bookmark, the one she had made for him years ago, the one he had carried to Campbell's plantation and back. She had left it for him, a final goodbye. Daniel picked it up, pressing it to his lips. A promise, a memory, a love that could not be erased, even if they never saw each other again. But in his heart, Daniel knew this wasn't the end of their story. Somehow, someday he would find her again, even if he had to travel to the ends of the earth. California was far, but not far enough to keep them apart forever. 5 years passed. The world changed around Thornridge Estate. War clouds gathered over the nation as the debate over slavery intensified. South Carolina buzzed with talk of secession, but within the walls of the Grand Hoe use, life continued much as it always had. Daniel Thornridge was 32 now, his face leaner, his eyes holding a permanent shadow of sadness. He had kept his word to his father in one respect. He had learned the family business, managed the plantation efficiently, even expanded their shipping interests to new markets. But he had also kept his vow to Mira. He never married. Despite his father's continued efforts to match him with suitable young women, Daniel remained firmly single. The once promising Charlotte Blackwell had long since married someone else, and the local gossips had given up predicting when the handsome Thornridge heir would finally settle down. William Thornridge's health had declined over the past year. At 65, he spent most days in his study, directing affairs from behind his desk, rather than riding the property as he once had. The relationship between father and son remained cool but functional. They spoke of business, weather, politics, never of the past, and certainly never of Mira. But Daniel had not forgotten her. Every night, he took out the blue bookmark she had left behind and wondered where she was, if she was happy, if she ever thought of him. California seemed a world away, a place of gold rushes and wild frontier towns. Was she safe there? Had she built a new life? Sometimes he considered going to find her, but California was vast, and he had no idea where to start looking. Besides, she had chosen to leave. Perhaps it was better to let her go, to hope she had found happiness away from the painful memories of Thornridge. Then, on a crisp October morning, everything changed. Daniel was reviewing accounts in the library, Mira's old domain, when Martha knocked on the door. "Excuse me, Master Daniel," she said, her face unusually animated. "There's someone here to see you." "Who is it?" Daniel asked, not looking up from his ledgers. "I think you should come and see for yourself, sir." Something in her voice made Daniel raise his head. Martha was smiling, a rare, knowing smile that instantly put him on alert. "What is it, Martha? Who's here?" "In the front parlor, sir," was all she would say. Curious and slightly annoyed, Daniel made his way to the parlor. He pushed open the door and froze. A woman stood by the window, her back to him, looking out at the garden. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress, her dark hair arranged in a neat bun at the nape of her neck. There was something achingly familiar about the way she held herself, the curve of her neck, the set of her shoulders. Then she turned, and Daniel's world stopped. "Mira," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. She looked different, more poised, more confident. Her clothes were those of a free woman of some means, not the simple dresses she had worn as a slave. But her eyes, those deep, expressive eyes, were exactly as he remembered. "Hello, Daniel," she said softly. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't speak. Was this a dream? A cruel trick of his lonely mind? "Is it really you?" he finally managed. She smiled. That smile that had haunted his dreams for 5 long years. "It's really me." Daniel crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She was solid, warm, real. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in her scent, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "I can't believe you're here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "How? Why?" Mira pulled back slightly to look at his face, her eyes drinking him in as eagerly as his did her. "I had to see you again, to know if—" She hesitated. "If you still felt the same." "Every day," Daniel said fervently. "Every hour. I've never stopped loving you, Mira. Not for a single moment." Tears filled her eyes. "I tried to forget, to build a new life. But I couldn't stop thinking about you, wondering what might have been." Daniel led her to the sofa, keeping hold of her hand, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. "Tell me everything. Where have you been? What have you done?" Mira took a deep breath. "After I left here, I went to California as your father arranged. San Francisco was different from anything I'd ever known. People there didn't care so much about where you came from, only what you could do." "What did you do?" Daniel asked, fascinated. "At first, I worked as a seamstress. I'd always been good with a needle." She smiled. "Then I met a woman named Eleanor Jenkins. She owned a small bookshop and needed help. When she learned I could read and loved books—" "You worked in a bookshop," Daniel said, smiling at the perfect rightness of it. Mira nodded. "Eleanor became like a mother to me. She had no children of her own, and when she passed away last year, she left me the shop." Daniel stared at her in wonder. "You own a bookshop?" "I did. I sold it before coming east." She looked down at their joined hands. "I wasn't sure if I should come. If you would want to see me. If you might be married." "I never married," Daniel said quietly. "I couldn't. Not when my heart belonged to you." They gazed at each other. 5 years of separation melting away in the warmth of that shared look. "How long will you stay?" Daniel asked, dreading the answer. "I don't know." Mira hesitated. "I've taken a room at the inn in town. I thought perhaps a week." "Stay here," Daniel said impulsively. "Not as a servant, as my guest." Alarm crossed her face. "Your father is too ill to concern himself with guests. Besides, this is my home too." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Please, Mira, I've lost 5 years with you. I don't want to lose a single day more." Before she could answer, the door opened and William Thornridge entered, leaning heavily on a cane. He stopped short at the sight of them, his face draining of color. "You," he said, staring at Mira as if seeing a ghost. Daniel stood, instinctively moving in front of Mira. "Father, I was just about to come find you. We have a visitor." William's eyes darted between the M. "I can see that." His voice was weaker than it once had been, but the authority was still there. "What is she doing here?" Mira stood, her posture straight and dignified. "Mr. Thornridge, I apologize for coming unannounced." William seemed taken aback by her composed manner, so different from the frightened slave girl he remembered. "You were supposed to stay in California," he said accusingly. "I did, for 5 years." Mira's voice was calm. "I built a life there, as you intended. But I needed to come back, to see Daniel one last time." "Last time?" Daniel repeated, turning to her in alarm. "What do you mean?" Mira looked at him sadly. "I can't stay, Daniel. You know that. Your father was right about one thing. There's no place for us here. Not together." "No," Daniel said firmly. "I'm not losing you again." William cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this like civilized people, in my study." Daniel was surprised by his father's relatively calm reaction, but he nodded. "Very well." The 3 of them made an unlikely procession to William's study. The aging plantation owner, his defiant son, and the former slave who had returned to upend their lives once again. Inside the study, William settled heavily into his chair. Daniel noticed how much older his father looked suddenly, how the vitality had drained from him. But the sharp intelligence in his eyes remained unchanged. "So," William said, looking at Mira, "California didn't suit you?" "It suited me very well," she replied. "I found freedom there, opportunity. Then why return?" Mira glanced at Daniel before answering. "To resolve the past, to find closure." "Closure," William repeated skeptically. "And now that you've seen my son, are you satisfied? Ready to return to your new life?" Before Mira could answer, Daniel stepped forward. "She's not going anywhere, father. Not without me." William's eyebrows shot up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if Mira leaves, I'm going with her." Daniel's voice was steady, determined. "I've done everything you asked for 5 years. I've learned the business, managed the plantation, expanded our interests, but I won't spend the rest of my life alone, missing the only woman I've ever loved." "You would abandon Thornridge? Your heritage? Your duty?" William D. demanded. "If I must." Daniel moved to stand beside Mira. "But I'm hoping it won't come to that." William looked genuinely puzzled. "What do you mean?" "The world is changing, father. The country is on the brink of war. Slavery may not exist in a few years." Daniel took Mira's hand. "Whatever happens, Thornridge will need to adapt. Why not start now?" "Start what?" "Speaking plainly, boy. Accept us. Accept Mira as my wife." William's face reddened. "Your wee fee. Have you lost your mind? The scandal would ruin us." "Times are changing," Daniel repeated, "and I don't care about scandal. I care about happiness, mine and hers." Throughout this exchange, Mira had remained silent, her eyes wide with surprise at Daniel's declaration. Now she squeezed his hand. "Daniel, I didn't come here expecting this. I only wanted to see you one more time." He turned to her. "Is that truly all you wanted? To say goodbye again?" She hesitated. I wanted to know if what we felt was real, if it could have lasted." "It was real," Daniel said softly. "It is real, and it has lasted. Through separation, through time, through everything." William watched them, something shifting in his expression. He seemed older suddenly, tired in a way that went beyond physical weakness. "You really love her that much?" he asked quietly. "Enough to give up everything?" Daniel met his father's gaze. "Yes, but I'd rather not have to choose. I'd rather have both, my family and the woman I love." For a long moment, William was silent, staring at them as if seeing them for the first time. Then, to their astonishment, he laughed. A short, rueful sound. "Your mother would have approved," he said unexpectedly. "She always said I was too concerned with appearances, with what others thought." Daniel blinked in surprise. His father rarely spoke of his mother, who had died when Daniel was 12. "She would have liked you," William said to Mira. "She valued education, intelligence, character over position." Mira didn't know how to respond to this sudden change. "Thank you, sir." William sighed heavily. "I'm an old man, set in my ways. The world I knew is disappearing, whether I like it or not." He looked at his son. "You really believe war is coming, that slavery will end?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "And when it does, plantations like Thornridge will need to change or die." William was quiet for a moment, considering. "And you think you can manage that change? Make Thornridge survive whatever comes?" "I know I can, especially with Mira beside me." William turned to Mira. "And you? Could you live here again, after everything? Could you be the wife of a plantation owner, knowing what that means in our society?" "I could be Daniel's wife," Mira said simply. "The rest, we would face together." William nodded slowly. "It won't be easy. People will talk. Some will shun you." "Let them," Daniel said, echoing the words he had spoken to Mira years ago at the Campbell plantation. "We don't need their approval to be happy." William looked from one to the other, then finally nodded. "Very well." Daniel stared at his father in disbelief. Very well. Just like that? What would you have me do? Disown you? Watch you walk away from everything our family has built? William shook his head. I'm too old and too tired for such drama, and perhaps I've been wrong about some things. It wasn't an apology. William Thornridge wasn't the apologizing type, but it was as close as they would get. Daniel felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, a tension he'd carried for so long he'd almost forgotten it was there. Thank you, Father, he said simply. William waved a dismissive hand. Don't thank me yet. There will be difficulties, prejudices to overcome, people who will never accept this union. We know, Mira said quietly, but we've faced worse. William looked at her with new respect. Yes, I suppose you have. He stood with effort. Now, if you'll excuse me, I find I need to rest. We can discuss practical matters tomorrow. After he left, Daniel and Mira stared at each other in amazement. Did that really just happen? Mira wispy read. Daniel pulled her into his arms. I think it did. My father actually gave us his blessing, or as close to a blessing as he's capable of giving. What changed him? Time, age, maybe seeing you again, seeing how you've changed. Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her face. Or maybe he's finally realized that some things are more important than tradition or what others think. Mira leaned into his touch. Do you really think we can make a life here? That people will accept us? Some will, some won't, Daniel said honestly, but together we can face anything. That evening, Mira stayed for dinner, not in the kitchen, but at the main table, seated beside Daniel. Martha nearly dropped the soup tureen when she saw the arrangement, but she recovered quickly, a small smile playing at her lips. William, to his credit, treated Mira as an honored guest, asking about her life in California, her bookshop, her impressions of San Francisco. If he was uncomfortable with the situation, he hid it well. After dinner, Daniel showed Mira to the guest room. It's not much compared to what you're used to now, he joked, remembering the tiny cabin she had once called home. It's perfect, she said, looking around. The elegant room with its four-poster bed and delicate furnishings. Daniel lingered at the doorway. I still can't believe you're here, that you came back. I had to know, she said simply, if there was still a chance for us. There was always a chance, Daniel said. As long as we both lived, there was hope. He wanted to stay, to hold her through the night, to make up for 5 years of separation. But he knew they needed to do things properly now. There would be enough scandal when their relationship became public knowledge. He wouldn't add to it by compromising her reputation under his father's roof. Good night, Mira, he said, reluctantly stepping back. I'll see you in the morning. Good night, Daniel. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness for Daniel. Having Mira at Thornridge again, not as a slave but as his equal, his partner, soon to be his wife, felt like a dream. They spent hours together in the library, their old sanctuary, talking about books they had read, experiences they had shared and missed, dreams for the future. Daniel showed her the changes he had made to the plantation, the improvements in living conditions for the slaves, his plans for eventually transitioning to paid labor. You've been preparing for emancipation, Mira observed as they walked the grounds one afternoon. Daniel nodded. I believe it's inevitable and right. She squeezed his hand. Your father must have resisted these changes. At first, but he's a businessman above all. Once I showed him how we could remain profitable with paid workers, he grudgingly agreed to try my methods on a small scale. Daniel smiled. Now he takes credit for the idea. Mira laughed, a sound that filled Daniel's heart with joy. Some things never change. Not everyone was pleased with Mira's presence or her relationship with Daniel. Some of the neighboring plantation owners stopped calling when they heard the rumors. Several longtime business associates suddenly found excuses to cancel meetings. Most painful for Daniel was the reaction of the Aldridge family, who had been friends with the Thornridges for generations. Mrs. Aldridge, upon seeing Daniel and Mira together in town, had crossed the street to avoid them, her face a mask of disgust. It doesn't matter, Daniel said when he saw Mira's hurt expression. Their friendship was always conditional on us behaving as they thought proper. But they've known you all your life, Mira said, and they never really knew me at all, Daniel replied. Not the real me. To their surprise, William seemed unbothered by the social fallout. Let them talk, he said dismissively when Daniel mentioned the Aldridges' snub. Their cotton isn't selling any better than ours. It was a purely practical response, typical of William, but Daniel appreciated it nonetheless. His father might not fully understand or approve of his son's choice, but he was standing by him in his own way. As November approached, wedding plans began in earnest. It would be a small ceremony held at Thornridge rather than in town, with only a few trusted friends in attendance. Martha bustled about, directing preparations with more energy than she'd shown in years, clearly delighted by the turn of events. One evening, as Daniel and Mira sat on the veranda watching the sunset, she turned to him with a serious expression. "I want to use some of my money to free Joseph," she said, "and any others who were kind to us." Daniel smiled. "I already did, last week. Joseph, Sarah from the kitchen, and Tom from the stables, they all have their papers. I offered them paid positions if they want to stay, or help relocating if they prefer to leave." Tears filled Mira's eyes. "You did that? Without telling me?" "I wanted it to be a surprise, a wedding gift." Daniel took her hand. "Eventually I want to free everyone, but we need to do it gradually, train people for new roles, ensure they have skills to support themselves." "You've thought of everything," Mira said, looking at him with wonder. "I've had 5 years to plan," Daniel replied. 5 years to imagine what life would be like if I ever found you again." The day before the wedding, an unexpected visitor arrived at Thornridge. Daniel was in the stables when Jenkins, his father's old foreman, came to find him. "There's someone here to see you, sir," Jenkins said, looking uncomfortable. "A Mr. Campbell." Daniel froze. Edward Campbell, the man who had once bought Mira, who had forced Daniel to work as a field hand to earn her freedom. What could he want after all this time? "Where is he?" Daniel asked. "Your father is entertaining him in the study," Jenkins replied. Daniel hurried to the house, unsure what to expect. When he entered the study, he found his father and Campbell sitting together, drinking brandy like old friends. "Ah, here he is," William said as Daniel entered. "You remember Mr. Campbell, I'm sure." Campbell stood, extending his hand. "Thornridge, it's been a while." Daniel shook his hand cautiously. "Mr. Campbell, this is unexpected." Campbell smiled, the same calculating smile Daniel remembered. "I heard some interesting news. Thought I'd come see for myself if it was true." "What news is that?" Daniel asked, though he already knew. "That you're marrying that girl, the one you worked 3 months in my fields for." Campbell shook his head in apparent amazement. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Her name is Mira," Daniel said, the old defensiveness rising. "And yes, we're getting married tomorrow." "Well, I'll be damned." Campbell looked genuinely impressed. "You really did it, defied everything and everyone for her. Is that why you're here? To express your disapproval?" Campbell laughed. "Disapproval? Boy, I'm here to congratulate you. It takes rare courage to follow your heart the way you have." Daniel blinked in surprise. "You approve?" "I wouldn't go that far," Campbell said honestly. "But I respect a man who knows what he wants and doesn't let anyone stop him, even if I think he's a fool." William chuckled. "That's essentially my position as well." Daniel looked between the two older men, suddenly seeing a similarity he'd never noticed before. Both pragmatists, both set in their ways, but both capable of recognizing determination when they saw it. "Will you stay for the wedding?" Daniel found himself asking. Campbell raised an eyebrow. "Would the bride want that? I wasn't exactly kind to either of you back then." "You were fair, in your way," Daniel admitted. "And without those 3 months at your plantation, I might never have understood what true work is. What it means to earn something through your own sweat and pain." Campbell nodded thoughtfully. "Good lessons for any man." He glanced at William. "Your father has invited me to stay. If you have no objection, I'd be honored to witness this unusual union." "Then stay," Daniel said. "Mira won't mind. She's not one to hold grudges." Later, when Daniel told Mira about Campbell's visit, she was surprisingly serene about it. "The past is past," she said. "We've all changed since then." Daniel marveled at her capacity for forgiveness. "You're extraordinary, you know that," she smiled. "I'm practical. Holding on to anger only hurts yourself." She hesitated, then added, "Speaking of the past, I have something to show you." From her pocket, she drew out a familiar piece of blue cloth, the bookmark she had made for him years ago, the one he had cherished and she had left behind when she went to California. "You kept it," Daniel said in wonder. "Of course I did. It was all I had of you." She pressed it into his hand. "I want you to have it back now, as a reminder of everything we overcame to be together." Daniel closed his fingers around the bookmark, feeling the weight of their share, history in that simple piece of cloth. "I love you, Mira, more than I have words to express." "You don't need words," she said softly. "You've shown me with every choice you've made." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of their union. The ceremony was held in the Thornridge garden, where late autumn roses still bloomed against the brick walls. Mira wore a simple gown of ivory silk, her hair adorned with tiny white flowy. As Daniel thought she had never looked more beautiful than when she walked toward him on that sun-dappled path, her eyes filled with love and hope. The minister was an old friend of Daniel's from university days, one of the few who had stood by him despite the scandal. The guests were few but sincere in their support. Martha and Jenkins from the household staff, Joseph, Sarah and Tom, now free but choosing to remain at Thornridge, a handful of business associates who had overcome their initial shock, and surprisingly Edward Campbell, who watched the proceedings with thoughtful interest. William Thornridge sat in a chair near the front, his health too fragile for him to stand throughout the ceremony, but his eyes were clear and alert as he watched his son pledge himself to a woman who had once been considered property on his own plantation. The world was indeed changing, and in that moment as Daniel and Mira spoke their vows beneath the clear blue sky, it seemed to be changing for the better. "I promise to love you, to honor you, to walk beside you through whatever comes," Daniel said, his voice strong and sure. "Not as master and servant, not in secret or in shame, but proudly as equals, as partners, as one heart." Mira's voice trembled slightly as she repeated similar words, her eyes never leaving his face. "In freedom and in love, now and always." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel kissed her with all the passion and tenderness of a love that had endured separation, prejudice, and seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The small gathering applauded, even William in his restrained way and Campbell with surprising enthusiasm. At the simple reception that followed, William approached the newly married couple. He looked tired but strangely at peace. "Your mother would be proud," he said to Daniel. "She always said you had more heart than sense." He smiled slightly. Perhaps she was right. "Thank you, Father," Daniel said, touched by this unexpected sentiment. William turned to Mira. "Welcome to the family, my dear. Officially at last." Mira curtsied slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Thornridge." "William, please. You're a Thornridge now, too." He hesitated, then added, "I may have been harsh in the past. Age brings perspective, if not always wisdom." It was as close to an apology as they would ever get from William Thornridge. Daniel squeezed Mira's hand, feeling a circle closing, a wound healing. Later, as the sun began to set and guests started to depart, Daniel and Mira stood together on the veranda, looking out over Thornridge Estate, their home now, their future. "Are you happy?" Daniel asked, his arm around her waist. Mira leaned her head against his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible." She looked up at him. "Are you? This isn't the life you imagined when you rode to Campbell's plantation 5 years ago." "No," Daniel admitted. "It's better. More complex, more challenging, but infinitely richer." He kissed her forehead. "We have so much work ahead of us, changing Thornridge, preparing for whatever comes with the war that seems inevitable. But we'll face it together." "Together," Mira repeated. "That's all I ever wanted." As darkness fell over the plantation, lights glowed warm and welcoming from the windows of the big house. Inside, a new chapter was beginning. not just for Daniel and Mira, but for Thornridge itself. The old order was passing. A new world was coming with all its pain and promise, and in that changing world, their love, once forbidden, now celebrated, stood as a beacon of hope for what might be possible. Daniel thought of the vow he had made that day at Campbell's plantation, kneeling in the dirt before Mira, a vow to love her, to make her his wife, to create a life together based on equality and respect, rather than ownership and obedience. It was a vow he had never spoken aloud after that day, but had carried in his heart through years of separation and struggle. A vow that had finally, against all odds, been fulfilled. As he held Mira in his arms, watching the stars appear one by one above Thornridge, Daniel knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them with the same courage and determination that had brought them to this moment. Their story, once a whispered secret, now an open declaration, had only just begun. The end.